Sabah al-Khair, good morning, dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni, and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English-language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Bringing you the news and views and the untold side of the Palestinian struggle for freedom from a Palestinian perspective. Good morning, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered. This morning we are joined by a superstar Palestinian, diaspora Palestinian, grew up in Germany, Lexi Alexander. Good morning, Lexi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so very much for joining us from LA, Hollywood.
Thank you. Yes, I can see the sign from my house. Not sure that means anything, but I am right here.
I was speaking to an American lawyer recently and we spoke about some stuff and he was amazed how much I knew about America, whether it was the Constitution, the states, the Electoral College, etc. You must be an American file, how you know so much about America. I said, listen, we're in Australia. All we do is watch American TV. We might not be geographically connected, but Australia, for all intents and purposes, if you're just watching the mainstream, is America.
Yeah, but what you just said is interesting because if you think about how Palestinians or Arabs are represented in American TV and movies, then what you just said is really bad for us.
No question. And it feeds into the whole narrative, the whole Orientalism that Edward Said talked about. But for over 100 years, how Hollywood has created a stereotype of the Arab as a swarthy, misogynistic, rich Arab. There's the sneaky Arab, the hook-nosed Arab, whether it's in Aladdin or whatever it might be. And all the culture and everything we gave to the West is just wiped away.
Yeah, for the longest time it was it still is on purpose and political, but there was actually a much more sophisticated campaign than I realized. And I only learned that from Dr. Jack Shaheen, a documentary in the book Real Bad Arab. And once I read all of that, and by the way, he's a very admirable man because he was Lebanese Christian. It's not just, as an everyday thing for Lebanese Christians to come out and be the defender of all Muslims. But he first spoke about representation of Arabs on screen. And then after 9/11, immediately switched and said, I'm just going to talk about Muslims, because he saw what was happening. Not that it didn't hit, Arab Christians as well, as here in America at least, but he knew what was going on. But that's how I learned how sophisticated it actually was. I didn't realize this was such a intent and on purpose campaign. I just thought it was kind of like normal, casual racism, I didn't know it was an actual plan.
We'll put a link to that in the podcast, Real Bad Arabs, I must say. Alex, tell us about your Palestine journey.
My Palestine journey, well, I guess I would have to start with my dad's Palestine journey. My dad, Khalil Merey, is born in Jerusalem, grew up in Ramallah. I hope I remember this all correctly. He doesn't really like to talk much about it. His dad died around 48, and then he was in the war, and he was in an Israeli prison. One of the things I remember clearly is my mom sometimes excusing his temper or behavior. My dad wasn't a bad guy, but there was certainly post-traumatic stress syndrome. It's not easy, to lose your country, to lose your house, to be in an Israeli prison. But what she pointed out to me at one point, which I will never forget in my life, because I was very angry at something my father said or done. I must have been like 10, 11. And she said, have you ever wondered where your father has the scars on his legs? And I saw them, but I never asked. And she explained to me that I barely get through this without crying, but she explained to me that in prison in Israel, they electrocuted him on the legs. And, you tell this to a 10, 11-year-old kid and it shifts something in you, because you don't understand you don't understand, why would any human do this to somebody else? And there's a level to this being in Germany on top of it, where there's a lot of talk about your parents, grandparents have done a lot of bad things. And my mother is German. And there was definitely her dad fought in Russia for the Nazis. So there's a lot of bad history on that side, right? And to grow up in this environment where in school you're being told that your grandparents did very bad things, but then your dad, you find out that this horrible thing happened to him. The way I was told it happened, my grandfather did to the Jews. And it's really kind of a mind spin at that age, right? And especially because it is so warped. My grandfather, the Nazi, did not want to meet me until I was 7. And he was so old that I think he didn't even realize he was meeting me, but because my mother married a Palestinian, and he I guess didn't agree with that. And for me, that was always the bad guys, right? And then I found out that my father also suffered from the bad guys. But then years later, you're trying to speak up for that, and somehow you're getting accused of anti-Semitism, because you're trying to speak up for the people who are still suffering exactly what my father suffered. So I think there's something special about growing up in Germany and having this dynamic in your family, and the good guys acting like bad guys and the bad guys acting like good guys, and people are trying to tell you, oh no, this is your people, your dad's people are the bad. And that never made sense to me. Palestinians have never done anything to anybody other than made a huge mistake and being welcoming to everybody. There's a very famous old video, I think on the British Pathé channel, that I found once, where you see the first, I think it was Otto von Bismarck, the German emperor, and then the British arriving. It was basically said to be the first Westerners arriving in Palestine. And, the Palestinians were dancing and bringing food and welcoming. And I looked at that and I thought, yeah, we're always proud of how welcoming we are, but maybe that was the mistake,
Maybe that was the mistake. We can't let these Western imperialism destroy the very beauty of our culture, which is that our house is open and that we assume that your heart is as pure as ours is. Sadly, and the reality is, these Western imperialists, these invaders came with dirty hearts and dirty souls and stole Palestine from us. Yeah. So let's see, you were born in Germany, grew up in Germany. Have you ever been to Palestine?
Yeah, I actually have it on my Instagram. First of all, I spent a lot of my childhood in Amman, Jordan, Suela, to be exact, because my parents ended up getting divorced. My father remarried, and I have I have actually siblings on every side you can imagine. So I have full Arab siblings, I have full Germans. It's a whole mishmash, but I always enjoyed visiting my dad in Amman, and I like my half siblings. There's basically only half siblings, but I feel like they're all my full siblings. As you can imagine, also that was an interesting culture clash. There's a funny thing that happened to me that I told somebody the other day, and an American friend of mine, and they couldn't quite understand what I was saying. And I want to tell you because I want to know if a Palestinian understands this. I heard from early on that my father really wanted a boy, right? As most Arab dads probably do. And he had already his name, Abu, I think it was Abu Sama, he had chosen, and here comes me, right? And so that was told by my mother. But then my father, when speaking Arabic to me, always talked to me with masculine articles and in a masculine, like I remember him always calling me Ya Salame, and I knew that was, hey man, I knew that what it meant. And I thought, why is my dad always speaking to me like I'm a boy? And he must really kind of wanted a boy so badly that now he's treating me like a boy. And I was so confused by this until I went to Jordan and realized all parents are doing this with their kids. When it's a term of endearment to switch genders in talking to your child, right? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Look, I've got 2 sons and a daughter.
Right.
And
you
so
sometimes call your daughter, what does she call you? How does she?
Baba, Baba, Yaba.
Baba. Yeah, so you don't do that with your kids?
No.
This is a big thing. I found this out later. This is a big thing among Palestinians only. No other Arab like group does this. This is only us guys. And ask around if somebody else knows about this, because I later found out sitting in a swimming pool in Amman, I remember this precisely, that oh, there's a lot of dads and moms who switch gender when they talking to their kid, and it's a term of endearment. And later I found out this is super common, but only among us. And I thought, I felt so like relieved that it wasn't just who was making up.
Lovely. So you would holiday, I suppose, a bit more than holiday, perhaps school holidays in Amman, and then back to Germany.
Yeah, it was always very interesting. And there's another really interesting aspect about growing up in Germany first. I learned German and Arabic at the same time, but then because my dad was traveling a lot, the German kind of took over because you're sitting there in Germany, right? And then I had to refresh basically when I was back in Jordan. And at some point, I remember us going to the Dead Sea, and a lot of my dad's brothers and cousins came. It was like the big like reunion at the Dead Sea. And his brothers and cousins were appalled by my Arabic, not because it was bad, but because I sounded like an Israeli. And, and nobody thinks of this, but the German accent, and you think about this from a colonization point of view, right? Of course, somebody who has a dialect that is more German, who then speaks Arabic, will always sound like an Israeli. And it was a very interesting thing, because I think that was really the point I stopped speaking Arabic out loud. Like I still do it. I mean, I say a lot of things that I have a very childish Arabic, but I can get by, like I went to Al Khalil a couple of years back and spent a long time there, and just with some distant family member, and got into the culture, and slowly, I explained to them why I'm embarrassed about it. And they were like, don't worry about it. It's okay. And then suddenly we were at the checkpoint, and they were like, don't speak Arabic. They were afraid that, the other people around us, our people, the Palestinians, would assume that I'm
Israeli.
Of that unit that I forgot, that unit.
Undercover ones,
and never gets away with it.
Yeah. You wouldn't be, those undercover agents speak perfect dialect Arabic to the region. I mean, they train them to such a degree as to beg a belief. And sadly, so many of them are, actually Palestinians. They're not Jews. They are Druze and Bedouins, and they're actually Palestinians that have, fifth columns turned on their own people. Lexi, so from Germany, Amman, you're now in LA, and you produce TV shows, and you're a filmmaker. You're in that artistic space. Tell us about that.
I am in it, but unfortunately, I'm barely hanging on, like pretty much all of us who make it. And I think there's like 4 Palestinians really working like frequently, and it's difficult, because I think we all would like to do something for our people, but that's, we can only take the little bird drops they're giving us, slowly. Like, for example, I managed to get these beautiful thobes, with all the Palestinian stitching into my last movie. But I felt so happy that I managed to do that, but and then later I thought, my God, I'm happy about this. This is like nothing, but it was a milestone for me. And then, I don't know if you've heard about the show Mo. And I see him get criticized, or I see his show get criticized from fellow Muslims, Arabs, whatever, that it's being westernized or something. And I feel a little sad about that, because people have to understand, for any of us to make it, to even get to work, is huge. For somebody to work and not play a terrorist is even bigger. I mean, there's almost, and I speak to Arab actors all the time and tell them, why are you still playing a terrorist? And, they say, I can't pay the rent, basically, and because there's not that many parts for us. And So the fact that, it happened for him, this is a good thing. More of us need to be coming in, and hopefully we can make a difference, and the next generation makes a bigger difference. I think what I sometimes don't like about our community, I tell you to be honest, and I really mean the Palestinians now, is obviously culturally we're all supposed to be doctors and lawyers. Right? I mean, my dad wanted the same thing. I mean, he still refers to, when people ask him what you do, she's playing in Hollywood still. Like, I'm playing. I was nominated for an Oscar. Why are you still calling it playing? But that's just them, and I take it with humor. We all deal with it. But for the community to not understand how much entertainment gets into people's mind around the world. This is the biggest tool any propaganda, whether it's American or Israeli or British, has, the biggest tool, okay? And they are, basically running it. Now, the good thing for us is that among the crowd that runs it, this involves American Christian, this is not like the Jews are running it, because that's actually not true. And the Jews who are running it are actually very left, to be honest. Mm-hmm. This is not a thing where that doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, I think if you want to know who radicalized me to be that outspoken about Palestine, leftist Jews. They said to me, how are you not speaking out about Palestine as a Palestinian in Hollywood? So this was my journey. So nobody can ever tell me, that this doesn't exist. It does, but it's still the strings are still more pulled by the politicians, by, the Pentagon looks at every script that has war in it, right? So this is a very political industry. And for years, the message has basically been, they're not humans, you can kill them. That's why people can watch for a whole week children in Gaza die and not feel sorry for us, because Hollywood has established that. And I wish our community would recognize this. And I feel sometimes among activists, Palestinian activists, it's almost like, she does that Hollywood thing, that's not no, I'm actually doing something important. The fact that I don't have the power yet to do it as much as I want to doesn't mean that it's not important. If one of us doesn't break in, or a few of us don't break in, and then bring in another generation, and then bring in another that's how you do it. We can't just let go of this industry that tells every story in the world. I wish parents would encourage their kids to become filmmakers, to become actors. I know it's the doctor thing always. I think it's a very honorable job to tell stories. And I think it's super important.
There's no question it's super important. As a Palestinian, stripped of your land, stripped of your wealth, stripped of your connection, the only thing they couldn't take from you what was in your brain. And so education became so very important, because that was your passport. Wherever you ended up with your education, you could reestablish yourself. I think increasingly, and I'm with you with respect to those absolute Palestinians that say Muammar is, and if you haven't seen the show, listeners, make sure you go to Netflix. The show's called Mo. He's a fantastic Palestinian American comedian. The show, there's 8 half-hour episodes. You won't stop watching it.
And I think what I think we have to tell people is that they may think, oh, well, that's not very Palestinian. Well, the diaspora Palestinians have different lives. And apparently a lot of people from Houston, Texas, to whom I cannot relate to either, to be honest. Texas is very different than LA. But a lot of them said, hey, this is super true. He's living like the Houston immigrant life. So we have to give him credit that he's telling his truth.
I'm an Australian Palestinian. Yeah, I grew up here. No connection to Mo, no connection to Houston and Texas. And there's so many parallels between my experience growing up and his.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So he's telling a story that those Palestinians that say, he's sold out and he's not being strong enough. The fact that he's there, he's humanizing Palestinians.
Yeah.
He's laughing at himself, but he's also laughing at the circumstance. He's creating a narrative that allows, and I've shared the link to all of my white friends and said, listen, watch this. And I actually saw it yesterday. He said, I watched it through. He said, it was so funny. Thanks so much for sending me the link. So many of the stories you've told me over the decade that I've known you, I can see the context now.
Right.
I mean, it's such a wonderful tool in the education and rehumanization, of Palestinians.
And that's what we really need to do. And, I'm trying to get it into people's head that, look, it's all great. You have a doctor in the family, but not everybody can be a doctor, some of them might change the world, but only very few, but what Mo does, and, I am in the business. I just haven't been able to, there's a certain power you have to get to say, I'm just going to do a Palestinian movie. Now I'm going to do all about Palestinian characters. I try to squeeze it in there, and I have managed to squeeze it in here, but not like him. And it's exactly what you said. That changes a lot of people's mind. I mean, it's probably kind of like what the Cosby Show did, there was a whole period of Black people only being thugs and not being thing. And while that in real life turned out differently, but I still remember, watching that show in Germany. It was worldwide. It was a huge hit. And he was with his wife and kids, and they were funny. That sounds horrible now, because why do we have to humanize people even? But, when you come from a dehumanized people, like we are, and I think we're almost at the worst state, because every time bombs are dropping on Gaza, I cannot believe that it doesn't move people more. I cannot believe it. And this is only possible because we are not humans to them. And that's what we need to change. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not saying it because I'm in it, but I'm saying it because I really believe this. Entertainment, also what you do, entertainment and journalism is the way we get into people's mind. And oftentimes people are too lazy to read serious journalism. So actually something like, or a beautiful fable or something, I actually remember watching The Idol on Netflix. Do you remember The Idol?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I told all my friends to watch this movie. I said, it's not about the conflict, even though it was, right, at times, right? But I wanted them to see that we make music, we have dreams, we sing, but all of our dreams, especially for Palestinians in Palestine, it's not as simple as standing in line at American Idol, he has to jump checkpoints and get fake papers and be almost caught and have a friend be a traitor. Like, it comes with so much tragedy. And a lot of people wrote me back, thank you for telling me to watch that movie. It's changed so much of my mind, because they don't get that behind the checkpoints, behind the wall, people have dreams. They're human,
They don't get it. And it's because, remember the narrative when Russia first invaded Ukraine, and, the BBC was running tutorials on how to make a Molotov cocktail. But the reportage, these are civilized people. They look like us. And there was one reporter that said, they're civilized. They've got Netflix accounts, as if this is the definer of Western care. The reality, blonde hair, blue-eyed, well, we have to care about them. White people suffering. This is outrageous. Immediately, Australia created a special Ukrainian refugee intake program. In the United Kingdom, they had an app. You could download Help a Ukrainian app, so you could, I've got a room available. I can take a person, we're a retired couple with 3 spare bedrooms. We could take a small family. Suddenly they were supporting each other. Oh my God, we're going to help these Ukrainians. But don't worry about Palestinians in the first instance. Australia was involved in Afghanistan and created the disaster and the debacle that is existing there today with the Taliban back. We've done nothing.
I know, and I love the cartoons that came out of it, where people are, have drawn one person throwing a Molotov cocktail hero, and next to it a Palestinian terrorist, and they're literally doing the same thing. And and it wasn't just one newscaster. I mean, I'm sure you've seen them all, because I think it was like 20 of them in the first, all of them saying they look like us. They, this is so strange that we have to help them. And then there came all the stuff that came out where they really didn't let, Black students that were in the Ukraine at the time on the bus. And, there's a lot of, I believe, Syrian and people from Yemen, and they were all pushed away and out. And there was a lot of racism on display, and it was all forgiven. And, I think this is where we come to a very good point, which is this is all based on white supremacy.
Absolutely. All based on white supremacy.
Yeah.
We were having a giggle before we started recording, Lexi, about how colonized peoples come together at critical moments. The passing of somebody's queen, certainly not mine. The intersectional connectivity between, Palestinians and Irish and indigenous peoples all over the world on Twitter.
I mean, it's a great solidarity, but I think we kind of have to talk a little bit about the Irish, and also like I've been, I'm not sure if you know this, I made a movie about football fans, and by football I mean soccer.
Yeah.
Do you guys say football or soccer?
We say soccer. Sorry.
That's okay. It's forgiven. But anyway, I've always been a big fan of the Celtic, and when you see the flags and stuff, and now you're talking about, it's not all of Scotland, but it's definitely the Celtic fans, but it's almost all of Ireland. And it blows my mind, if you really think about it, that the Irish are really the only white people who they don't relate to other white people who colonize,
Mm-hmm.
They relate to all the people who have their land stolen, and I admire it very much. There's a really great spirit in them that they can say, we would much rather be with Palestinians than be with the English, because that's not usual when it comes to white people.
No, you're 100% right. I was in Scotland only a few weeks ago.
Oh,
and,
really?
Yeah. Celtic had qualified for, I can't remember, the European Cup or something, and the joy amongst these guys. Anyway, and I saw them and, asked them what, because I don't really follow proper football very closely. And he said, we're Celtic fans and we've just qualified, and this is going to mean like 50 million euros to our club. And so our club's security is, I said, Celtic, I'm Palestinian. And I swear to you, the hug, I mean, there was about a dozen of these guys. They would have been 18 to 25. I mean, I was like a small child being thrown around, having met his estranged family. He's Palestinian, Viva Palestina. I mean,
yeah, I know it's so. Look, I literally start crying when you talk to this. I find it so touching, because I think there's such a letdown by so many white people who should know better. Having grown up in a German school where you taught over and over again the sins of your grandfathers, and how that never can happen again, and it's really kind of put into your head. And the message they took from that is, so we're never doing it to Jewish people again. Well, that kind of changed. They are doing it to Jewish people, but only leftist Jewish people. Jewish people who stand up for Palestinian rights get blacklisted, lose their jobs in Germany. So the lesson they've taken from this, where they're supposed to learn not to be monsters anymore, is we don't let anybody bully Israel, no matter how ethno-states are, no matter what they do. The psychology of this is so unbelievable, and they don't see it. They don't see it. There's now a right-wing party in Germany, a very right-wing party, and many of them converge to Judaism and then join the IDF. These are Germans we're talking about. This is a big thing, And one of them was a politician, and his whole poster for his campaign was how he is a Jew in the IDF. And it's wild how, again, there's this twisted idea of, what the lesson was and what they didn't learn. And then seeing the Celtic and the Irish be so different. Sometimes they are my last hope in the white people overall, to be honest, because if it were not for them, who could we look at and say, what, we can rely on them? Not really. I mean, there's a lot of people that are allies, but as a whole, where you find most of them, and that's only because they have been through the same exact thing that Palestinians went through.
There's no question at all, Lexi. Thank you so very much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you for having me.
No, pleasure. Lexi Alexander, filmmaker, Palestinian, so she's necessarily an activist. We spoke about that earlier on. She's done movie shows.
Ajnabi when I'm home.
Ajnabi when she's home. Ajnabi, a foreigner when she's home. She's a movie maker, TV shows. Lexi Alexander, thanks so very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I'm going to tweet your podcast to my friends now.
Fantastic. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to share the podcast, tell your friends, and remember, there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.